Well, it appears as though the terrorist group Hamas is set to name its new leader outside of Gaza following Yahya Sinwar's death. Sinwar, as you may recall, was the architect behind the October 7th terrorist attack in southern Israel, which left around 1,200 people dead. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Lisa Daftari from the Foreign Desk in Los Angeles. She's our foreign affairs expert. Lisa, it appears as though Sinwar's brother Mohammed may become the new leader of Hamas.
It looks like they want to leave him in charge of the entire war, leave him in Gaza, and maybe select a leader from outside of Gaza. And the question is, how long will this guy last for? As you know, Israel in the last couple of weeks has been going, after the heads of these terror organizations, particularly fixated more on Hezbollah. In this case, in Sinwar's case, they weren't really targeting Sinwar, but they had the opportunity. And as a matter of fact, it was a soldier who only had 9 months training. So a newbie took him out because the opportunity was there. And then with DNA testing, they realized they did, in fact, kill Sinwar. It's an interesting year following the October 7th attacks, to follow how Israel basically waiting for the blessings of the West going into Gaza, waiting to go into Gaza, then waiting to go into Rafah. And if you recall President Biden's warnings, Kamala Harris's warnings not to go into Rafah, and then you realize how much was in Rafah and how important this is to defeating this terror cancer that exists surrounding Israel, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the tunnel systems, the weapons, their leaders. Also, the hostages. Let's talk about the hostages. The fact that in over a year, the hostages have not been returned to Israel. And, it's obviously their duty and their priority in this war to get the hostages back.
And Lisa, the Times of Israel is reporting now that 6 of the hostages killed at the end of August in the Rafah tunnel, allegedly used as human shields by Hamas leader Sinwar, survived mostly on energy bars before they were executed by Hamas. And apparently they were too weak to even be moved with the terrorist leader Sinwar.
Right. So, to those who think that these hostages are being wined and dined in the possession of Hamas, obviously that's not true. And also, are we surprised that they used these hostages as human shields? They use their own people also as human shields. I mean, these are the casualties that we see when they are embedding themselves. And when I say they, I say the terrorists are embedding themselves in civilian areas. They're taking the hostages, putting them in civilian areas. Their tunnel systems are in civilian areas or in mosques, in schools where they keep weapons. And this is really the reality of a terror organization. It's crazy how we have to really educate the public as to what a terror organization is, what they're doing, and how they're fixated not just on killing Jews, but really anybody in the West, any Christian, any Jew, any moderate Muslim who does not fold and to vow allegiance to their brand of this bastardized version of radical Islam. And this is exactly what we're seeing. Stories like this proving once again that they take human shields, that they take hostages, that they don't feed them, they don't treat them well. Obviously, that's the definition of a terrorist organization. And why would they take hostages if they didn't mean to intend harm on them, on Israel, and continue this war?
And here on Bridge City News, Lisa, you will rarely hear us refer to Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis as a militant group, but instead we call them out for really what they are, a terrorist organization, each and every one of them.
And thank you for doing that, because not every media organization is doing that right now, and that's a disservice to their audiences.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. You bet. Now, the U.S. is investigating the online publication of classified materials allegedly detailing recent planning by Israel's Air Force and Navy for a potential strike on the Islamic Republic. The FBI is looking into the leak and how the information was obtained.
It's a crazy story, Hal. Imagine Israel having to share its intel, its plans with what it perceives as its main ally, its democratic ally in the West, the United States, and then having moles, having these leaks, having spies within the government who are going to leak that information to obviously jeopardize Israel's plans to help the Islamic Republic, to help the terrorists. I would hope and this is not something that's being said too often, but I would hope that Israel would be smart enough at this point not to trust all the elements inside the Biden administration and not to share all of its top secrets with this administration. If you recall, Hal, there were members of the Biden cabinet who actually resigned because they were so anti-Israel and so pro-terrorist that they had to resign, and because they weren't happy with the Biden taking, what they perceived as a pro-Israel stance. Now, many of us believe that the Biden administration and now Kamala Harris could do much more for Israel and not tie its hands and not micromanage a war that is against our common enemy. But to them, imagine to them, somebody who is serving the United States, they're so radicalized and brainwashed, they left their positions in government. So we know that these elements exist. And because of that, I would hope that Israel would know better than to share anything with the Biden administration right now. It also speaks to, and I'll be short, it also speaks to the positioning of the Biden administration, and before that, the Obama administration, to appease the Iran regime. So if these attacks are going to be against Iran's regime, whether it's by the Israeli Navy or Air Force, they would like to give them a heads up. Another element, another example of appeasement towards Iran's regime by this administration.
And the Iran regime hosted a number of naval exercises in the Indian Ocean over the weekend, Lisa. They teamed up with warships from both Russia and Oman. How concerned should we be about this here in the West?
You know, it's more flexing, and this is exactly what the Islamic Republic does when they find themselves in a position of perhaps perceived weakness. Remember, all of these hits against Hezbollah are hits against Iran's regime, whether it's against Hamas or against Hezbollah, and of course, assassinating Hania inside Iran, and they know that it's coming. They know that Israel has every reason to target the Islamic Republic, and for the fact that they keep finding these bedfellows, that is very concerning. The part where they team up with elements like China and Russia and now Oman and others. There's North Korea, there's Venezuela, there's many others. We know that in recent weeks, we've seen leaders from Hamas, from Hezbollah go into Iran. We've seen members of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria. We've seen in Turkey's Erdogan go into Iran as well. So, it is concerning that they're able to find these bedfellows, who I won't call them strange bedfellows, because at this point they're common bedfellows, because they are rogue elements who are just teaming up against the United States. But it only speaks to one thing, and that is weakness, perceived weakness in their foreign policy here in the United States. If there was strength and perceived strength and leadership and exceptionalism coming from the White House and coming from Washington, D.C., you wouldn't see these rogue elements teaming up the way that they have.
Lisa, one of the wars that we've talked about before that Iran is funding, is backing, is obviously the war between Hezbollah and the Israel Defense Forces in Lebanon. What's interesting, though, is that the deputy leader of the terrorist group Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, reportedly fled Lebanon for Tehran on October the 5th following escalating tensions with Hezbollah.
Right, and it's funny that he chose to hide out in Iran under the shelter of the Islamic Republic, because that's where we saw Hania assassinated, because there were guards that were compromised, and they were helping the Israelis to find him. So he might suffer a similar fate here. But the point being that, for those who try to create daylight between Islamic Republic, the regime inside Iran, and these terror organizations, they are literally finding haven by the regime and inside Iran. So, it's so lopsided here. Those who, it's the terrorists on one side and those who oppose terrorism on the other side. If you watch the Iranian people over the last 2 years who came out onto the streets in the aftermath of the 22-year-old being killed for her hijab, Mahsa Amini, you saw it wasn't the first time, but it was really the most dramatic, the most, I would say, influential time that the Iranians came out onto the streets and said, we are being led for 45 years now by a terror element, and they are killing us, they are hanging us, and really taking out the eyes of female protesters, or hanging male protesters, or those who post on their Facebook pages or on their Instagrams. And then that same regime funding the protests that we have here on American and Canadian campuses. I mean, it just makes no sense. And Hal, I appreciate you taking the time to have these kinds of conversations and this dialogue to really connect the dots and educate people on what is going on here. You're either with the terrorists or you're going to do everything in your power to stand against them.
Yeah, it's really important to inform our viewers, not only informing but educating at the same time. You bet, Lisa. Now, the IDF says that they're planning to attack a Hezbollah unit in Lebanon that used to pay operatives of the terrorist group to help them buy arms. And Israel has once again issued evacuation warnings for Beirut.
Right. And again, a very important point about them issuing evacuation notices, trying to get civilians out of harm's way. Lebanon is a bit different because the Lebanese people, as much as they are in harm's way, very little support for Hezbollah inside Lebanon. Most Lebanese people, see them as a cancer cell inside Lebanon. They have asked the West for help. There are many Christians living inside Lebanon, a lot of moderate Muslims as well. They have asked the West to base our aid to Lebanon and make it contingent upon the Lebanese army getting Hezbollah out of that country, and they have not succeeded. So, with Israel actually choosing these targets to be very, very focused. Right in here, we see them hitting the financial institutions inside Hezbollah. That's how you dismantle a terror organization. I mean, other than, carpet bombing their area, they're everywhere. They're like cockroaches. They're literally everywhere. And they have taken up areas, important areas near the capital as well, moving upwards from the south of Lebanon. And really, this is how you do it. You take out the most important parts of their terror infrastructure, hoping to dismantle it once and for all.
Lisa, a video that recently went viral at a Kamala Harris rally showed someone yelling, "Jesus is Lord," and Kamala Harris allegedly countering back with, "You're at the wrong rally." Now, I had a look at that, and it looked pretty legit. Something like that really can't sit well with many Christians in the United States.
I I actually had a political, which I don't really engage in many of these yesterday, but it's always mind-boggling when you come across anyone of faith, whether they're Jewish or Christian or even Muslim in this case, who don't really agree with her flip-flopping on many, many important issues. By the same token, someone walked into a protest and talked about genocide, Israel committing genocide, and she said something, and I'm not quoting exactly, but something to the effect of "what there's truth to what he's saying, or there's validity to what he's saying," and I don't know how she did said it, but she validated what he said. Look, either understand that what she stands for, which is not much, but it's more so what she doesn't stand for. And here we are living in really a country that has Judeo-Christian roots, a country that does support Israel, a country that does stand for, really democracy. Transparency, a lot of the things that a free press, a lot of the things that she has not stood for. So I know that a lot of people will be voting for her to vote against Donald Trump. But I find it really challenging to believe that people who do have a list of things that are important to them can actually say that she does support those things. We shall see what will happen here, Hal. I mean, I know Election Day is very, very close, but it seems like the polls keep changing every single day. This is very reminiscent of Trump and Hillary. I think it's an interesting juxtaposition, because I think the polls were kind of skewed then, and then we had a surprise. They may be skewed now, but we shall see.
So, Lisa, let's talk about the poll numbers a little bit. Is it too close to call at this point between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris?
I did read somewhere, because we are seeing the polls shift a bit, and a lot of news outlets are now reporting neck and neck. A lot of them are reporting that Trump is ahead in battleground states. And up to now, we had heard that Kamala actually has an edge over Trump. What I did read somewhere is that among certain demographics, ever since Kamala started doing her sit-down interviews a bit more, she's not doing too many, but ever since she started doing a bit more of them, she has dropped in the polls a bit. I know she is looking to gain in a lot of those battleground states, including Pennsylvania and Michigan. I don't know if that's going to happen, particularly in Pennsylvania. That's going to be harder. I think that's going to go to Trump. But anything is possible, Hal, as we have seen.
And what's interesting, too, is Trump is thinking outside of the box when it comes to his campaigning. I saw him at a McDonald's working the drive-thru.
You know, that was an interesting touch. I think it was one of the most unique things we have seen a candidate do. Also hitting upon Kamala's claim that she worked at a McDonald's, where he actually is rolling up his sleeves and working at a McDonald's. I think it was nice. I think the people who saw it, and if you saw, there were like miles of people standing outside and kind of supporting him, cheering him on. It was a good visual, very smart for his team for doing that, and we shall see how it moves the needle. And again, I think he's doing better in the battleground states. I don't know if that's any indication of election day polling, but we shall see.
We shall see indeed. Political reporter and foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari from the Foreign Desk, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
Thank you for having me.